Welcome to the debate. Right now, your company's executives are probably looking at a new artificial intelligence tool that can, theoretically do your job in seconds.
Oh, almost certainly.
Right. And the math on their architectural blueprint tells them to just fire you, buy a software license, and watch their profit margins expand. I mean, it looks perfectly clean on paper. But when they actually attempt to execute that plan on the enterprise floor, the entire system inevitably catches fire.
Yeah, it never quite works out that cleanly, does it?
Exactly. So today we're looking at the great AI lie, this really seductive boardroom dogma that says innovation just seamlessly erases the friction of human labor. We're grounding our discussion in Jonathan H. Westover's recent comprehensive analysis of U.S. labor market data, enterprise AI implementation, and frontier research.
Which is a fantastic piece of research, by the way.
It really is. And the central controversy we're examining today is this. Is artificial intelligence fundamentally functioning as a labor-augmenting technology that, requires us to redesign our workforce? Or is the current data merely masking a delayed, inevitable wave of white-collar labor replacement?
It really is the defining economic tension of this whole technological cycle. Like, if you're a knowledge worker listening to this isn't just an abstract economic theory, it is the literal trajectory of your entire career.
Spot on. And my position today is that the empirical evidence decisively shows AI is a labor-augmenting technology. The prevalent narrative in the boardroom, this idea of immediate, systematic workforce reduction, it's not just empirically false, it is actively destroying organizational capability.
So you're saying the whole software for salary substitution model is basically a myth?
I am saying it is failing in practice. I mean, if we look at the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics data, unemployment remains below 4.5% right through late 2024. And that is despite the most aggressive AI adoption across knowledge sectors we've ever seen.
Right, but...
And just to add to that, Peter McCrory, who's the head of economic research at Anthropic, analyzed real-world AI usage patterns and found, no observable waves of white-collar unemployment triggered by these systems.
I come at it from a different way. I mean, this entire debate about augmentation versus replacement, it's fundamentally an issue of timeline. It's not about taxonomy.
How so?
Well, arguing that AI is purely augmentative right now just because we haven't seen mass layoffs yet it's incredibly short-sighted. It's like watching a bulldozer clear a foundation and assuming the human construction workers are perfectly safe while entirely ignoring that the bulldozer is actively learning how to lay the bricks itself.
Okay, that's quite an image.
Right? But if you look at the historical evidence from previous automation waves, like the work done by economists Author and Salamones, the workforce impacts almost always emerge several years after the initial adoption phase.
But you're assuming that the impact, when it finally arrives, will be a net negative for total employment. Like, why should we look at the current 4.5% unemployment rate and just assume it's a false sense of security?
Because aggregate employment data is a really blunt instrument. It obscures localized displacement. What the data actually masks right now is the quiet, structural elimination of entry-level and junior positions.
You mean the roles that are most easily automated?
Exactly. The junior copywriter, the entry-level data analyst, the first-year legal associate. If a company just quietly stops hiring for those roles, it doesn't immediately spike the national unemployment rate, but it fundamentally threatens the long-term leadership pipeline of that entire industry. So when we celebrate today's, augmentation, we're really just celebrating a transitional phase. It's a stepping stone toward structural labor replacement.
Well, let's slow down and look at the mechanism of how these tools are actually functioning inside enterprises today, rather than, projecting a future where the bulldozer lays the bricks.
Fair enough.
Because large language models and generative systems, they operate by enhancing human judgment. They don't function as autonomous substitutes. Let's ground this in the GitHub Copilot research by Peng and colleagues.
Yeah, that's a classic study at this point.
Right. It's one of the earliest, most widely deployed generative AI tools on the market. And the data show that developers completed tasks significantly faster when using it,
Plus, they reported much higher job satisfaction.
Right, they wrote code faster. But did the companies need as many developers?
That is exactly the critical mechanism here. The organizations did not reduce their developer headcount. When the developers saved time on boilerplate coding, they didn't just sit idle, and they definitely weren't fired.
So what did they do?
They tackled far more ambitious projects. The organization's overall output ceiling was just raised. And this isn't just an isolated study, it's supported by the Conference Board survey of chief human resource officers. They found that 80% of organizations are experimenting with AI right now, but only 15% have actual plans for workforce reduction.
Interesting.
Yeah, because the empirical business value comes from capability enhancement. When a company uses AI to do more, like to launch a product faster or analyze a deeper data set, they see a 65% return on investment. If they just use AI to fire people and cut costs, they only hit their ROI targets about 30% of the time.
But hold on. That 65% ROI on capability enhancement is exactly what you would mathematically expect in the early friction-heavy learning phase of a brand new general-purpose technology.
Friction heavy?
Yeah, of course organizations are retaining staff right now. They have to. They literally need the humans to babysit the algorithms, to write the prompts, to fix the hallucinations. But we have to address the reality that work expansion is not infinite.
What do you mean by not infinite? Like, if you can build better software, why wouldn't a company just keep building it?
Because consumer demand has a ceiling. I mean, a developer might be able to write 40% more code using Copilot. But consumer demand for new software applications doesn't automatically scale up 40% in perpetuity just to absorb that extra capacity.
I suppose that's true eventually.
Right. Eventually, you hit an equilibrium point where a company realizes they can meet their product roadmap with half the engineering team. And while CHROs might be holding off on mass layoffs today, the workers themselves read the writing on the wall. If you look at Pew Research data, 60% of knowledge workers report job insecurity regarding AI.
You think that anxiety is proof of impending replacement?
I think the anxiety is a highly accurate leading indicator. If you're that junior coder, you recognize the replacement potential because you literally watch the tool absorb your daily tasks. The systems are mapping the workflows. In a very real sense, the human workers today are being paid to train their eventual replacements.
I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective on the historical pattern of technology adoption. I want to look at the introduction of spreadsheet software.
Oh, VisiCalc and all that.
Exactly. When VisiCalc and later Excel were first introduced, they superficially appeared to completely automate the exact tasks done by legions of human bookkeepers and accounting clerks.
Sure.
I mean, before Excel, you had rooms of people with physical ledgers, calculators, and erasers. By the logic of your demand ceiling argument, the demand for financial workers should have just plummeted because the software could calculate a ledger instantly.
But it didn't plummet. It shifted.
Exactly. It fundamentally augmented human capability. It reduced the cost of running financial models, which meant companies didn't just fire their bookkeepers. They started running 50 financial models instead of 5. It massively increased the demand for skilled financial analysts who could actually interpret all that new data.
Right.
So I challenged you to explain why AI is fundamentally different from this historical pattern. Like, when the cost of generating cognitive work drops, why would demand suddenly hit a hard wall?
It is a brilliant historical analogy, it really is. But the distinction lies in the concept of irreducible human judgment.
Okay, explain that.
Well, spreadsheets automated calculation. Calculation is a deterministic process. 2 + 2 is always 4. The spreadsheet did the math, but the human was still strictly required for the semantic understanding of what those numbers actually meant for the business. Frontier AI is completely different.
Because it understands context?
Exactly. It's actively crossing the boundary into semantic understanding, into pattern recognition, and into probabilistic reasoning. Those are the exact cognitive domains that define the human analyst role you just mentioned.
But if the AI truly possesses semantic understanding today, why do we see catastrophic failures when companies actually try to execute the boardroom dogma of replacing humans?
What failures are you referring to?
Let's look at the case studies from the 2023 and 2024 period, specifically in the banking and tech sectors. We saw aggressive workforce reductions based on the promise of AI capabilities. And it resulted in spectacular operational failures.
Well, I wouldn't call them spectacular failures. I would call them the messy realities of early adoption.
I would strongly disagree. I mean, when those large banks aggressively cut their customer service and back office functions to rely on algorithmic systems, they hemorrhage what organizational theorists Nonaka and Takichi call tacit knowledge.
And for our listeners, define how you're using tacit knowledge here.
Sure. So tacit knowledge is the unwritten organizational context. It's the relationship networks. It's the intuitive problem-solving expertise that a seasoned employee just holds in their head.
Like institutional memory.
Exactly. A veteran loan officer might look at a file and know, based on highly localized market quirks, that a business is actually sound despite a weird quarter. You cannot readily capture that intuition in a prompt or an algorithm.
Right.
When companies shed that tacit knowledge to save a few salaries, it led to severe quality degradation, massive regulatory compliance issues, and incredibly costly rehiring cycles. The assumed cost savings completely evaporated.
Because they cut too deep too fast.
Because they didn't account for the necessity of what we call knowledge infrastructure. Look at Bechtel, the massive engineering firm. They actively deploy AI for complex project planning, but they don't fire the engineers.
So how do they handle it?
They maintain extensive failure mode libraries. Human engineers actively cross-reference the machine's output with historical physical world failures that the AI doesn't inherently understand. Or look at the Cleveland Clinic. They're systematically capturing complex physician reasoning to oversee clinical AI. An AI might flag a sepsis risk, but the human doctor has the tacit knowledge to see it's a false alarm based on a unique medication interaction. You just cannot maintain that vital infrastructure without retaining deep human domain expertise.
That's a compelling argument. But have you considered that these rehiring cycles in banking and tech are merely short-term course corrections? Short-term?
Yes, shedding tacit knowledge too early causes operational hiccups, obviously. But you were describing a single snapshot in time. You're assuming the tacit knowledge barrier is permanent and impenetrable.
You believe it isn't?
I know it isn't, because forward-looking companies are actively engineering their way around this reliance on human intuition right now. Look at the manufacturing sector, which is historically almost a decade ahead of the service sector when it comes to automation.
True.
BMW's Factory of the Future operates parallel human and AI-augmented production lines. Meta's utilizing modular implementation strategies across different business functions.
But they still have humans in the loop for now. What they are actually doing is building adaptive capacity. They are rigorously testing the boundaries of the AI's autonomy. They fully accept a few costly rehiring cycles today as the necessary price of learning exactly how to digitize and encode that tacit knowledge.
I see.
Their explicit, long-term goal is to phase out the human reliance the moment the systems cross the autonomy threshold. They're not retreating from replacement. They're just calibrating their timeline.
But I don't interpret that calibration as an inevitable march toward zero human involvement. Even in the most highly automated environments on Earth, the sheer complexity of edge cases continually generates fresh demand for human oversight.
If you say so.
Because these historical analogies suggest a permanent need for human-in-the-loop governance, we have to look at how organizations are actually succeeding today. And the ones succeeding are those pivoting away from this illusion of replacement and toward deep capability building and strategic workforce redesign.
Well, let's hear an example, because I think the definition of redesign is doing a lot of heavy lifting there.
Let's look at Kaiser Permanente. When they deployed sophisticated clinical AI tools, they didn't just sit in a boardroom and calculate how many nursing hours the AI could replace in order to cut headcount. Instead, they analyzed where the algorithmic output fundamentally requires clinical context. And they created an entirely new role, the clinical AI coordinator.
So they just changed the title?
No, they changed the function. These are experienced veteran nurses whose specific job is to integrate the AI tools into patient care, to interpret the edge cases, and to override the machine when human intuition demands it.
Okay.
Deloitte has done something very similar. They restructured their consulting teams to preserve high-level human advisory while integrating AI fluency into the workflow. And if you want to talk about scale, look at the massive reskilling investments happening right now.
The corporate programs.
Right. Amazon Web Services is training 21 million workers globally.
JP Morgan Chase launched a $350 million upskilling initiative. This isn't just PR. It is proactive, evidence-based workforce planning that treats humans as an asset to be leveled up, not a cost to be eliminated.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. Let me tell you why. Holding up massive corporate reskilling programs as some kind of universal panacea is dangerously optimistic. It completely ignores the brutal reality of skill obsolescence, particularly for mid-career and senior professionals.
How so? I mean, if a company pays to train you, you adapt.
You can certainly train 21 million people in basic cloud architecture or fundamental AI literacy, but what actually happens to the senior data analyst who spent 20 years mastering complex manual predictive modeling, a task that a frontier AI model can now execute flawlessly in 14 seconds?
Well,
A 3-week corporate upskilling module on how to write better prompts does not magically replace 2 decades of specialized, high-income human capital that has just been commoditized overnight.
but it's not commoditized if they leverage it to manage the AI.
Factory workers in the 1990s to simply learn to code. It completely lacks intellectual honesty about the structural realities of technological unemployment. Not everyone can be the overseer of the machine.
But assuming that those 2 decades of human capital are fully commoditized is exactly the boardroom dogma I'm challenging here. The senior data analyst's true value to the company was never just the mechanical execution of the model.
What was it then?
Their value was knowing which model to build to solve a highly specific strategic problem. Their value was understanding the internal organizational politics required to actually implement the model's findings across different departments. The AI does not know the business context. It does not know the unwritten goals of the executive team.
It doesn't know those unwritten goals today. But if we're talking about ethical organizational management, what organizational psychologists call procedural justice, true fairness requires acknowledging that displacement is inevitable for a large portion of the workforce. It means not selling false hope about universal augmentation.
So what does procedural justice actually look like in your replacement timeline?
It means building the safety net now. If an organization looks at the data and genuinely believes the technology will eventually shift from augmenting to replacing, and frankly, the economic incentives to reach that point are overwhelming, then the most ethical blueprint is to prepare financial and structural support immediately.
Like severances?
More than that, look at Unilever's restructuring program. They didn't just fire people on a Friday. They provided 12 months of advance notice for position eliminations. That is a full year for an employee to prepare, alongside funded retraining and internal mobility support.
But they still eliminated the positions.
Yes, because they were intellectually honest about the technology's trajectory. Salesforce offered 6-month severance packages with extended healthcare continuation. General Motors implemented multi-year support programs, including fully funded retraining for workers displaced by AI-enabled manufacturing lines.
Right. I've seen those programs.
These companies are acknowledging the structural reality of the shift. They are building the financial and social scaffolding for an era where AI actually replaces labor, rather than clinging to this comforting, almost naive myth that every single employee will simply be magically elevated to a higher level of cognitive work.
Well, I don't see capability building as a naive myth. I see it as the only empirically validated way to actually capture the massive financial value of the technology. If you treat your workforce as a disposable cost center to be minimized, you destroy the exact mechanism by which AI generates value in the real world. And this brings us back to the core of the evidence we have been examining from the source material. The data strictly supports treating AI as a collaborative partner,
A temporary partner.
a structural partner. Organizations must prioritize transparent communication. Look at how Microsoft handled their internal Copilot rollout. They made it explicitly, structurally clear to their teams that the goal was productivity enhancement, not headcount reduction.
Right, to prevent a panic.
Exactly. And when you remove the fear of replacement, the workforce actually adopts the tool. Furthermore, implementing true human-in-the-loop governance proves that distributed human oversight is a structural requirement for frontier AI. We see this with Novartis establishing ethics boards and pharmaceutical R&D to oversee AI drug discovery, or, Bank of America's Responsible AI Council.
Yeah, those are good initiatives.
This isn't a temporary crutch while the bulldozer learns to lay bricks. The evidence points to an ongoing symbiotic relationship between deep human expertise and machine capability.
And while I absolutely agree that premature aggressive cuts are highly damaging to a company, and I agree that tacit knowledge is a critical barrier in the short term, the underlying mechanics of capital and technology just point elsewhere.
You really think it's just unavoidable?
I do. The structural capacity for artificial intelligence to replace white-collar labor is simply a matter of time. The economic pressures on a boardroom to reduce fixed labor costs are too profound for any executive to ignore forever. Therefore, organizational survival requires rigorous adaptive capacity.
Right.
It requires the flexibility to pivot, the intellectual honesty to monitor and admit to localized displacement when it happens, and the ethical mandate to establish robust financial safety nets for the people who will inevitably be left behind. Relying on the optimism that AI will forever remain an obedient, augmenting assistant completely ignores the trajectory of frontier research.
Well, we've explored quite a bit of ground today, but I think there is a profound point of convergence in our reading of Westover's material. Whether you view current AI as permanently augmentative, as I do, or transitionally replacing, as you do, we both absolutely agree that the simplistic boardroom dogma, this idea of easily substituting a software license for a human salary, is a dangerous miscalculation.
Oh, absolutely. The software for salary equation is a mathematical fantasy. It completely fails to account for the friction of reality. Both of our perspectives demand that organizations must move far beyond that simplistic ledger if they want to survive this transition.
It really highlights the complexity of the religion of technology narrative. We naturally want the clean architectural blueprint where the math works perfectly and the machine saves us from all friction.
But the real world is messy.
Exactly. The reality of human and machine interaction will always be messy, deeply interdependent, and incredibly nuanced. As these frontier capabilities rapidly evolve, this exact line between augmentation and replacement is going to remain the single most critical frontier for all of us to watch. We leave it to you to look at the evidence, analyze the historical lags, and evaluate the organizational realities to form your own conclusion. Thank you for joining us on the debate.